Mike, turn your games down.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another comic episode of Games My Mom Found. I am Mike Albertin, and who's with me tonight?
Peter Bingham-Pankratz, once again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be
where
back.
Where might people know you from, besides this show?
Well, if you're a fan of the show, you might know me from several other previous Star Wars episodes. I have also am an author, so if you want to have a good sci-fi adventure, you should check out The Fifth Civilization, available now wherever books are sold.
And Amazon.
And Amazon. Don't mention it.
That's where I bought my copy that is somewhere in this house.
Yes, go to Amazon and buy it, and like Mike, keep it in your house for a long time.
Maybe read it too.
Maybe, if you want.
So we are here to talk about Star Wars Heir to the Empire. But not the novel. We are here to talk about the comic, which is a comic adaptation of the novel that came out in... The novel came out in 1991, and the comic adaptation came out in, I think, 1995. Comic miniseries.
Sometime later.
And the funny thing is, when I first had told some people, oh, we're going to do this, he's like, you're doing the novel? Like, no, the comic. He's like, what are you talking about? It's a novel. I'm like, yes, but there's also, thankfully, a comic that I was able to read instead.
They didn't make a movie out of it, so the next best thing is a comic.
You know, they should make a movie out of this, though.
That's, I was thinking that the other day. I think they should adapt these Star Wars EU stuff. But you know what they're going to do? They would do an animated thing. And
yeah,
I'm sure they would do animated to save money. And that's just not the same. I want the same budget as The Force Awakens and all those other movies for these comics.
Yeah, we wouldn't get that. And Heir to the Empire was originally written by Timothy Zahn, but the comic was, if I can find it, written by Mike Barron and, published by Dark Horse. It was a 6-issue miniseries. For those that don't know, Heir to the Empire is kind of like their continuation of the story. It's like one of the big stories that came out for the extended universe. That was it one of the first stories that kind of continued Star Wars?
It was the first. It was the first novel. There was Return of the Jedi in 1983, and then there was the only real new Star Wars content in the 80s was the role-playing game, which Timothy Zahn wrote for. And then in the 90s, they wanted to revive it, so Timothy Zahn wrote this book, and it was a New York Times bestseller book, very surprisingly. But it was the first kind of expanded universe novel for at least, probably 10 years or so. Maybe a little bit less than 10 years, but there was a long period. It was the end of the Dark Ages, I guess you could say.
A lot of people kind of put it that way.
Yeah, it was a big hit. It was 3 books: Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and Last Command was the trilogy.
I have read none of the actual books, but I did listen to the audiobook of the first one like 6 years ago. Or no, more than that now, like 7 years ago. I don't remember any of it, but I listened to it, and I also found that I can't listen to books, at least at that time, and I was walking up and down stairs in the middle of freaking like 10 below weather. Remember stuff very well, apparently.
Understandable.
I would walk around and pick up garbage, and I was listening to this book on my headphones. I'll try and make sure someone didn't try to rob me. So,
well, that's important.
And make sure I didn't freeze to death too. That was interesting.
The life and death scenario right here.
It was fucking cold that winter too. I was an outdoor maintenance guy. My job was to drive around a pickup truck and suck up garbage. And then sometimes I would park my truck, get dropped off, and go and clean up cigarette butts in places, and then get back in my truck frozen.
Jeez.
Yeah, don't miss it one bit.
No, you shouldn't.
I remember thinking to myself, I know how Luke felt in Hoth now, as I'm walking around in the cold with my overalls on and my 2 jackets and trying not to freeze to death. Like, I understand.
Didn't want your tauntaun to freeze before it reached the first marker?
No, I did not. It was a shitty job. But enough of that. That's where my only association of this book was until this past week. Forget when we were recording Star Wars Dark Empire comics, that was when I got turned on to this comic. I found out it even existed, that somebody took the book and they made a comic adaptation, and I've been excited to read it ever since.
Right, yeah. And I had never, I had it, I owned it, but I hadn't really read it, the comic adaptation. I read the book so long ago, so.
20 years.
Been about 20 years at least. But I did have the trilogy in trade paperback form that I was able to get from the bookstore that I work at. So I had it, and I was excited to finally get into it for the first time for this podcast.
With like the little bit of memory I had of what was coming and what the story was, it was very cool to see it drawn instead of reading it or hearing it in my ear. And Dark Empire took place more years than this one, correct? Like
I believe in the Dark Empire took place right after this, technically, because I think it mentions in the opening, there's like an opening text of Dark Empire that says, Thrawn had just died. Spoilers.
Spoiler.
I know. Or he'd been defeated. Maybe
I'll look at the bright side. None of this is canon anymore, so it doesn't matter.
There was some history with that. I believe there were Dark Empire and Heir to the Empire, the book, went into production around the same time. So they had to change some things around to make it. There's some discontinuity issues with that. But that's a whole nother podcast. I think you can listen to the Dark Empire episode and I talk about that. But so this takes place 5 years after, and the opening text, 5 years after the destruction of the second Death Star. So 5 years after Return of the Jedi, this takes place.
Which I like seeing this. Like, I like seeing the way that Luke and all of them are at this time, because I didn't get that in my movies, and I will always be upset about that. But the way that this comic starts off, I think, is also interesting. Of course, you have your normal, here's your bunch of text to what's all going on. 5 years after the destruction of the second Death Star, the Rebel Alliance has driven the remnants of the old Imperial Starfleet to a distant corner of the galaxy. That's all I'm going to read. But, you have the same thing, all this, and especially in that voice. But the first scene you get is a Star Destroyer, and you get some people talking, and someone gets mad at them, and you also are introduced to a character who's obviously in charge of the ship, and you also see he has certain guards that aren't stormtroopers. They're like some different race that you've never seen before. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what they're called.
I may be pronouncing it wrong, but Nogri, something like Nogri.
Okay. And I think that's interesting, and just the way that you're introduced to this blue character with red eyes as an alien race that I don't think you ever saw before either.
No.
Correctly?
I don't know if they mentioned it in this book, but he was a Chiss, Chiss.
Okay. I don't think they do.
Yeah, but that's what his race was. But if you're coming the first time, you're like, who is this guy? Blue skin, red eyes. They never showed this before.
Yeah, and you just see him commanding a Star Destroyer, and they're fighting some rebels, and I think they take out the rebels too. If I'm looking at this correctly, they wipe out the people they're fighting.
He uses tactics. He knows that. What is it? He's very smart. You can tell. He knows that there's an alum, an alien called an alum commanding the Force, and they cannot handle the unstructured attack of a Marg Savile. So what that means, I guess, is that he's a very smart technician who defeats this force, and we've never seen that in Star Wars before. All the Imperials are pretty much incompetent, but this guy is an Imperial who defeated the rebels, and he knows what he's doing, and he sounds very smart. What is his deal?
And they mention that he's a Grand? Yeah, they mention he's also a Grand Admiral, which I don't think were we introduced to Grand Admirals during the original trilogy?
I think there were admirals, but I think there were Grand Moffs, but the Grand Admiral was not. Part of the movies, at least.
Okay.
New creation.
And then it jumps, and then it shows Luke on Coruscant, which is, I think, cool to see. So, because at this point, the rebels have taken over Coruscant, mostly, and you see him looking at a ghost Obi-Wan, just kind of trying to reflect on everything that's happened and what he's supposed to be doing with his life. And the art, I think, is good. Like, I know when we covered Dark Empire, it was a very stylized. I like this art for everyone's faces, I felt, was much easier for me, on my eyes.
Yeah, it's a much more standard comic. It's not artsy. It's like, it tries to be comic-y. So. Oh,
and it introduces you to Han and Chewbacca, who are at some bar trying to trick someone to help them do something. I don't remember what they're up to exactly.
Up to Tix, they mention the name Talon Card, who is another smuggler. Yeah. But he doesn't come into play right away.
No, and then you also get a scene of Talon Card, the guy they're looking for, talking to someone named Mara Jade, which means a lot to me. Only because I know Extended Universe at this time, but wouldn't mean nothing to you as a reader, because it's just some woman with the smuggler, and it just the comic just jumps back and forth through just showing you different characters that are around.
Right. Yeah. And you introduce them, and that Talon Card is working with. He talks to Captain Pelion, or Admiral Thrawn's number 2 guy.
Yeah.
So this guy is kind of like Lando was in the Empire. He's going to be a traitor, you think?
Because I think they come down. Oh yeah, because they were meeting with him to trade, which it doesn't really go into here yet. I think in the book it mentioned what they were trading already.
Well, they want
Yasamar. Yasamari?
Yeah, I don't know how to say it. It's one of those hard words, Isomari or something. But you don't know why yet, why they want it.
No,
they want something.
And the next thing you see is them landing at some abandoned temple, and they're looking for somebody of a Jedi. And They have these little yellow creatures on their shoulders that their whole point is that these things, I guess, push back the Force.
Yeah, that's the Isomari.
Okay, and that's what they do. There's this old Jedi master they're looking for who's hiding out on this planet that they then want to get him to join them. I remember there's a lot more to him that's not mentioned in this first series.
Yeah, he's definitely going to play a bigger part. He is an old Jedi master who's kind of gone crazy. But, spoilers to the future, I believe he's a clone of this guy who went crazy. And I think they mentioned it because his name here is spelled with 2 U's, Joruus C'baoth. And then some people refer to him with 1 U. So it was Joruus with 2 U's and Joruus with 1 U. And it's kind of a subtle hint that this guy is like the second version of this old Jedi master.
Okay, like he takes them to the mountain where they want to go, and there's this one line, like, I see all these dead people, all these candles. He's like, yeah, I killed them.
Right.
So I'm going to kill you. And this is when he finds out that the animals that they have on them reflect the Force, so therefore you can't hurt them with the Force.
Yeah, it's a great image when he's kind of lightning them, and there's just a big bubble around them. And Thrawn's just standing there like, oh, is that the best you've got?
And then he joins them because they promise him that if he comes with them, there are 2 different Jedis, Darth Vader's kids, that he will then abduct for him. So he will have his own Jedi to train and manipulate.
Mm-hmm.
Which is his whole story, what he's up to.
Right.
His whole purpose, I guess. I mean, whole motivation. And then I do like seeing, you see Admiral Akbar, but now he's not Admiral. But you see all the, the rebels, the government that they're forming. You see them together and Leia being part of that. And I think they're being sent to some planet to meet with the government, is what it was. Balsamy or something.
Yeah, they
a little strange.
Yeah, it's kind of just some political stuff. People talk about the prequels having political stuff, but these books had a lot of political things in them too.
Which fits. I mean, if you were this era after a government is overthrown, you're going to have political stuff happen.
Right, yeah. It does fit, yeah. I mean, it fits a little bit in the prequels too, of course. But there's kind of a lot of setup. There's a Bothan guy, what's his name? Borsk Fela, who's he's one of the lead Republic members, New Republic guys, and he's doing his machinations in there, and he plays a much bigger part, I believe, in the later book.
Okay,
but he doesn't play a huge part in this first one.
Yeah, and you see Luke, Leia, Han. They all go to this planet, C-3PO, and then I think somebody kind of wants them to divert, why don't you go look at the marketplace? So Luke isn't with them, and then as they're walking through the marketplace, Leia and Han get attacked by these. What the hell were they called again?
Nogri,
which. They look like they look like orcs to me, is the best way for me to put it. That's how I always envision them.
Or kind of like gorillas,
Yeah, gorilla orcs.
Kind of made to look like some kind of barbarian creature. I hope I'm not pronouncing them wrong, but I've never listened to the audiobook where they'd say the actual pronunciation.
I did a long time ago, and I can't remember it.
So Admiral Akbar would say it's a trap. These Nogri try and it's a trap.
And then it brings you to issue 2, which is where you see Luke getting confronted by them also.
Right.
And I always love Luke in the black outfit with the cape. I'm always such a big fan of that Luke. The Return of the Jedi Luke.
I remember you saying that very well.
I will say it all the time, every time it comes. And I like seeing him fighting them because, he's using different tactics. He's trying to burn these tapestries and, grab them with the tapestries, and they start lighting the tapestries on fire, or gluing them in place because they're trying to capture him. And then there's a really cool panel where he throws his lightsaber and he takes out 8 guys in one with one lightsaber throw. I'm like, okay, now that's the Luke I want to see in the damn movies.
And you see blood. I don't even know if Disney comics today would show blood. It's very.
I feel like if you got hit by a lightsaber, there might not be that much blood because it would cauterize the wound.
That is true. However, you definitely see blood here.
Yeah, when you get cut open, it would just you would be cut in half, but it would burn everything, so you wouldn't bleed. It would But you're cut in half, it wouldn't matter. So you'd be dead anyway. So
yeah.
But it's really cool to see. And it's cool to see Luke being, vicious when he has to.
Right. Because, everybody, they're in danger. So he's helping his friends by, slicing open this multiple people. Probably a dozen people, at least, in these images.
And you have Han Solo being Han Solo, where, they're getting attacked by the Nogri. he ends up taking a big box of jewels and dumping it on the ground. All these people start rushing them and try to steal the jewels to make a diversion for them to escape.
That's a very, I don't know, that is Han Solo. It's also very Indiana Jonesy. You know? That's something he would definitely do.
And you have Luke using the glue gun to like whip around and take out more people with the lightsaber.
Right. He's pretty badass in these few panels.
Which is nice to see because that's how he would be in this era.
Right, yeah.
Because he's a Jedi Knight and he's been training. He's the only Jedi Knight. Like you know, we never really get to see him be him in the movies because he wasn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we get him back in the movie, he's drinking milk. So, you know, we don't get the Luke I wanted. But
oh boy, let's not go there.
I will someday, not right now. And then you see them board the Millennium Falcon, and then they realize it's a trap, and they leave. You know, they're not supposed to leave; they're still supposed to meet with the government, but they're like, "Fuck this, we're out of here," because they're trying to capture Leia. So Han Solo's like, "I don't care what the government wants. I'm going to take care of you," because she's pregnant right now with the twins, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think they learned that at some point. Maybe.
Yeah, they mentioned it because in Dark Empire, they were already born, weren't they? The twins.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I vaguely remember, and then it jumps back to Grand Admiral Thrawn, and I like when you see him because in this one panel you see him, he's talking to the Jedi Master. He has 3 of those little Yasamari just in the room with him on branches.
He doesn't want anything to go wrong.
He is a really good character, though.
Yeah, he's smart and he's thoughtful and he knows what he's doing, and he's often wins. You know, it's a capable villain, kind of like Vader was. You know, he's very intelligent in this. Like when you see him planning these different attacks that he's doing and what he's up to, like I forget what exactly he's up to in the beginning, but he's trying to attack different rebels to set them up because they need ships for the military. Yeah, and he wants to get to Palpatine's storehouse, and they don't really. They mention it kind of. He's has a warehouse, and it's called Mount Tantus, but they never really get to it in this book. But he wants something that's on like Palpatine's archives or whatever. Okay, I don't think they meant. Yeah, you're right. They didn't mention it much in this or at all. But they may mention it more in the book, but they do mention Mount Tantus at the beginning, and they say we want to get to the Emperor's storehouse or something. And that's what the Jedi for. Yeah, that's part of it. I wish I remembered exactly. When I read the next books, I'll know exactly. But there's something that he wants there. Okay. And he's always moving. You know, he's like a chess master. That's how you can describe it. He's always 3 steps ahead, and he knows what the rebels are going to do, and he knows how they'll respond to his attacks and stuff. And so I think that's one of the reasons he has appeal, is because he's so calculating. He knows his enemy. He's like Sun Tzu, the art of war. He's very intelligent. And I mean, also he's a character that now is canon again in the Disney stuff. Well, they knew he was popular. He was probably the most popular EU character. And so if they said he never existed, people would be up in arms, so to speak. He's in the Rebel show in the second half of it, which is worth watching someday, as I said before. And then you do get to see another scene that I'm very a fan of, where you see Luke trying to train Leia with a little whatever hell they're called, little training droid thing. Remote. Yeah. I like seeing that. I like seeing her training, and then he gets sent to Dagobah for some reason. I forget what exactly happened. He gets a message from the Dark Jedi, right? Or this Jedi Master it was. And he hears the name Dagobah, and he knows that some Jedi had trouble with Dark Jedi during the Clone Wars and chased them as far as Dagobah. Okay. So it kind of gives him an idea of, well, I better go to Dagobah to find out. It's not clear. I guess it's not really clear why exactly. Maybe the book explains it for it, but he's like, I better go to Dagobah and see if I could pick up the trail of these Dark Jedi. And they mentioned the Clone Wars, which at this time, no one really knew what those were about. That's because the movies hadn't come out yet. Lucas hadn't wrote it. Lucas had not wrote it. So it's very kind of bare bones about what they're about. But they do mention it. Because that's the one thing they weren't allowed to mention, right? They had to stay away from that. Yeah. I mean, they mentioned it, but they couldn't say what happened and what time or whatever. It's really too bad he didn't let people just make the Clone Wars for him. Just stay away from it. that's a whole nother topic. And then you see Han and Leia, which this part kind of makes me laugh. They go back to this planet, the Fash, that apparently was bombed by the Empire, and they land in what looks like an obvious trap, like in a crater, and they get attacked, and a fake Millennium Falcon shows up. It's the same type of ship. Yeah. And because the whole idea was to trap them, to get them to run into the wrong ship. And he's like, wait a second, that doesn't look right. Like, it doesn't have the guns, or it doesn't have this, or something is missing. Yeah. I thought that was kind of cool. Like, it's a lot of trouble to go through to catch these people. It's it's a unique thing. I'm surprised they haven't tried it before or since. Like, it's like these ships, theoretically, they're mass produced. So
yeah. And all because it doesn't have the undersized blasters, and that's what got his attention.
Right. So basically, Han just tears it up with a lightsaber, which is kind of silly, but...
Yeah, you don't see him use a lightsaber very often, so it was cool to see him just... And apparently, again, it shows you how powerful a lightsaber is. Apparently, you just hold it underneath the ship and run, and you blow up the entire ship.
I guess it worked.
Yeah, and then they end up going... I guess they want him to come back with Leia to go back to that planet or something of that nature, but he won't go there, so he's end up going to go meet with Lando now.
Right.
Because they need a code breaker to help disguise her so people can't find Leia. Mm-hmm. And then it jumps back to Luke on Dagobah, which is nice to see. And they do make some comment on here, something about, Yoda training Vader, which that never happened. But I do like when Luke is kind of hallucinating, in the cave and he sees, the Sarlacc pit, and then he sees Mara Jade catch the lightsaber instead. Which again means nothing to him or anybody.
It's a good dream, kind of like the cave. It's like the Darth Vader, him fighting Darth Vader and The Empire Strikes Back.
Because one of the ideas that they'll mention later in this comic is that Mara Jade was at Jabba's palace.
Right. Yeah.
She was there, but she survived.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she wasn't in the movie because she didn't exist yet, but she was there. Promise me, yeah, she was there. Just trust me. And so then Luke leaves, and you see, which this was I thought interesting when you have Han and Leia show up to what Lando's doing now, and Lando has like a giant. How would you describe that?
It's like a solar ship.
To block
it's like a giant. It's a giant umbrella, basically, or parasol.
Like, what is he even doing with it? Like, I didn't really get this. Like, is he mining planets that are too close to the sun or something?
They didn't explain it in this book. I used to know more about it. I think there was the essential guide to vehicles, and they talked about it.
Okay,
but it's something to do with. It's a mining thing of some kind. It's like Lando's new venture that he's trying out. But it has something to do with the sun, I believe. It's a solar ship, but I don't remember much more than that.
Okay, I know they talk about it.
Wikipedia,
protecting them from the sun, and you see these mole miners, which are these little ships that are burning holes into a planet or an asteroid or something to mine. And I guess he found it in Cloud City or something. He found these plans, or something, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's Star Wars for you sometimes. And then it brings you to issue 3, which again, this is something where it doesn't really make sense at the time as it's happening.
Yeah.
Where Luke shows up, and then you have the Imperials, Admiral Thrawn is attacking Lando and his mining operation, and he doesn't understand what's happening. But what they're all up to is they're trying to steal mole miners.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's what they're up to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one scene I like in here that I want to bring up is that you actually see cloud cars driving around this building that Lando has.
That's right.
That made me happy because I'm always a big fan of cloud cars.
They're fun vehicles, and you don't really see them too often. But it's like, I guess they're Lando's signature.
Yeah, and it looks like they do another showing Thrawn being Thrawn, where he uses a freighter as a trap to catch Luke or something. Yeah. So I
think I just want to point out the one beautiful image of him, stroking the little Yasumari creature like he's Blofeld in James Bond.
Yeah.
That must have been intentional.
Oh, it is. It was a reference to that. But he puts a freighter in front of him so that way he has to come out of light speed, I think it was. And then they put a tractor beam on him because they're trying to catch Luke for the Jedi guy that they have with them.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I like this when he's in the tractor beam and he launches like photon torpedoes? No, proton. Sorry, photon is Star Trek.
Proton of this universe, yeah.
He launches protons into like the tractor beam in order to break him free, but it also like fucks up his X-Wing, which they know about. The guy's like, yeah, he got out of the tractor beam, but his X-Wing is damaged now.
Yeah.
And
then we have a good
Thrawn be a badass where he has somebody get their head cut off for not admitting their mistake.
Now there's blood. That's definitely graphic violence.
Yeah. Well, I like what he says. Anyone can make an error ensign, but that error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it.
So he's doing a little bit of the Vader stuff there.
Yeah, and after he cuts off the guy, he said the error has now been corrected. He killed him for it.
That's a Vader witticism right there.
Yeah. This kind of was a replacement for Vader in a way, but he's a more intelligent Vader.
Yeah. He's not as he has like goals and allies and stuff, and you kind of see him more of a human, even though he's not human. you kind of see him more as human, whereas Darth Vader is, when you first see him, you think of him as kind of like a force of evil.
And more robotic.
Or robotic, yeah.
He's a man in a suit versus this being just a guy in a military outfit. He's nowhere near what Vader is.
Right, yeah.
And it's cool seeing Luke trying to fix this X-Wing out in space. He has his helmet on, he has a cord, even though I don't think that would work, but, it's Star Wars. But it's cool to see him trying to fix it. And then he also jumps to where Leia was then, because they switched ships, and they put Leia and Chewbacca on Lando's ship, while Lando and Han went in the Millennium Falcon, so that way they can't track. Because they realized somebody in the rebel government or the New Republic, is a traitor. So, and then they go to Kashyyyk.
Kashyyyk, I believe.
I always like seeing Kashyyyk. I'm always been a big fan of the Wookiee planet.
Oh, yeah. Not since the holiday special have we seen it in all of its glory.
They weren't celebrating Life Day, at least in this comic, so it's okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. The first image of them appearing is really cool. It's like these huge trees, and it's gorgeous. And, they land and talk to the Wookiees, and there's a Wookiee speaking, English. And Leia turns to Chewie and says, "Let me guess, you had a speech impediment all these years." And then the Wookiee who's speaking English says, "It's I who have the speech impediment." Come, let me show you the preparations. So, it's kind of neat. Like, this, everybody, all the Wookiees are talking normally, but this one is speaking English, and it's basically so the reader can understand it. But
yeah,
it's a nice little touch.
And you also see like that the Nagri are on the planet hunting her. Also, like you kind of see one of them,
right? And
then it jumps back to Luke, where he's stranded, and some random like freighter ship finds him. And uses some kind of weird tractor beam thing to pull him in. A cylinder, they call it. What the hell do they call it?
A cylinder.
A force cylinder.
Yeah, whatever that means.
It's just a tractor beam. Where they then bring him on this ship, and then they take away his weapons. And they shock him. No, they shock him in the back. Is what they do. And this is where you see Mara Jade again.
Right.
The same girl he saw in his dreams. And you're introduced to, God, what is that guy's name again? Oh yeah, Talon Karrde, which in the first issue, which is a guy that Han Solo is trying to meet up with.
Yeah. Smuggler, kind of like a Han Solo, with a little bit of an edge to him.
See, I remembered bits and pieces of this. Like, as I got to the fourth issue, where you kind of see where Luke wakes up and now he's a prisoner, and Mara Jade's holding a gun at him, and they're on, like, this jungle camp. I vaguely remembered bits and pieces of this from the audio novel.
Yeah.
But not very well.
Understandable. I think it does start to slow down a little bit here, I would say, in terms of story. Because there's a lot of action in the first couple issues, and then now it's kind of like, it's a little bit slower pace when you introduce the characters and stuff, if you ask me.
Well, just set up, like showing him, he tries to use his force power, then he learns that he can't because of the Asamari who live on this planet, reject the force, so he can't do anything with it. And they took away his weapon, so he can't fight.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They do a good job of showing that. And, in very few pages, introducing, or very few panels introducing you to that. And then it shows you Han and Lando are at some other planet trying to meet with. Oh no, they're at the same planet, aren't they? Yeah, they're trying to go get a contact to meet with Talon, whatever his name is.
I think it's Card. I think it just pronounced Card. If I remember.
It's cool to see. Like there's.
Yeah,
I like the art. Han be Han. Like he's playing cards with people at one point, and
Yeah, he kind of like him. So they set him up. So the deliberate choice to like kind of play the hits. Like he's a smuggler and he's a gambler, card player, kind of ruffian, typical Han Solo stuff. So when they were doing this book, they wanted to show you that he kind of hasn't changed his ways, or he kind of can slip back into the old ways. There's kind of, it's fun. The casino that they set up is really cool. It's like a casino on the water that looks very, architecturally awesome.
Yeah, it does. I wonder if they have a arena where these weird little monsters, animals run around, look like camels. And then some kid is going to look up the sky and know he can be a Jedi one day, too.
I wonder Probably what not. You could be referring to.
And we always make jokes. And then I like when you have them, like, because Talon Karrde knows, or Talon, whatever his name is, he knows they're coming. I can't pronounce his name for some reason. And they take Luke and they throw Luke in like a little like warehouse and lock him up.
Yeah.
And she shoots the door. I like that. I like Mara Jade in this.
Yeah, Mara Jade's good. And Luke, of course, gets out using his
This was
hand.
Cool. Where he's trying to find a power source and nothing will work. Everything is damaged. He's like, "Oh, I have a power source in my hand in his Robotican. So he uses that because this takes place. Oh yeah, it takes place after Return of the Jedi. So he's able to just plug it in and opens the door that way.
Yeah, it's a really neat point.
It was cool to see, and then you kind of see Lando and Han talking with Talon, like because they're trying to. I think they're trying to get him to help the New Republic. I think it was, or they needed a Master Splicer. That's what it was.
Yeah,
and they have the Falcon hidden out there, covered up, because again he's working with he's working with multiple people, because at the same time the Imperials show up, and he's like okay, we should hide Han Solo and them, and make sure they don't realize Luke is here, and they see that, and then you see Luke escape and steal a ship, and Mara Jade chases after him, which I did remember that vaguely in the book, from the book.
Yeah, it's a nice, when they land, he has some nice little banter between the two of them.
It's good seeing them. Like, he crashes the ship. I think she crashes too, going after him, and then you have Admiral Thrawn landing, and I like how you see right away he doesn't trust anybody, and Han Solo like, okay, like why is this guy that we're trying to work with working with the Imperials also? Kind of like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
I think Luke goes to rescue Mara Jade from the fallen ship, and that's when she pulls a gun on him.
Well, he's ever the hero.
Yeah.
But
yeah. He knew it was his future wife.
Spoilers.
It's like way later, though, because it's not even in this that because I remember in Dark Empire, they weren't together yet.
I don't even think she was in Dark Empire.
She's not.
Yeah.
But they weren't married, I don't think, yet.
Yeah, they weren't. That's a whole nother thing. They don't even, apparently Han and Lando and them don't even know Grand Admiral Thrawn's name. They want to pay for it to learn who he is, but Talon Karrde won't give them that right away.
It's not for sale or something like that.
It's not for sale, yeah.
Or not yet. It's just funny seeing, because issue 5 starts with Luke being up at gunpoint, because he just keeps getting captured in this.
Yeah, a lot of stuff, is happening to him in these books,
Yeah.
There's not a lot that he personally, he goes off on these adventures, but he keeps getting captured, you're right, and seeing it now, that's like, this is the third time so far in this book he's been captured, second or third.
He's not doing super good in this comic.
He's a little behind. He's a little behind the times. But there's a good scene, again, where these creatures, what are they called again?
Yasamari?
So when him and Mara Jade are in the camping at night and just sitting around, and the Vorkskers.
Oh yeah, like they look like little dragons, maybe, and is that a good way to put it? Or very, very big vicious dogs. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, they're like dragon hounds. That's my name for them now. Dragon hounds. I'm stealing that trademark.
I did like that. It was cool seeing them, and he saves her at one point. Or she keeps blasting them. He's like, if you just give me my lightsaber, she's like, I don't trust you, so I'll just keep shooting them away from you.
Yeah. It's a very well done scene. And you get the sense that, sense that they're fighting, but, she needs to kill him. She wants to kill him, but maybe there's a hint of romance in there, maybe.
And I do like when Han and them figure out where the prisoner was, because they find the warehouse, and they're like, hey, look at this. And they put 2 and 2 together and figure out that there was a droid here, an astromech, and there was a guy here that this power source came from a hand. Like, they figure out it was Luke was there.
Yeah.
And you see Admiral Thrawn already kind of putting 2 and 2 together that Skywalker was there, and he doesn't trust them.
Right, yeah.
Because he don't trust anybody, really.
Why would you?
So it's cool to see, and you have Talon Karrde kind of coming to the conclusion that he's going to have to leave this planet. He's been here for a while because he knows Admiral Thrawn's not going to let this go. He's not going to not pick up on this. And at the same time, and then it jumps back to seeing Leia on Kashyyyk being attacked by the Nagri, and you get to see her kind of kick ass with her lightsaber and cut people up.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I like how they just have her running around in a bra and panties pretty much too. They drew her like that. I thought that was amusing too, which makes sense. I mean, she was sleeping, but they make her a badass. Like, she's just taking out people and escaping the Nagri and fighting with a few different Wookiees and stuff. It's cool to see, and like you get to kind of see how she's also it's creative. Like, there's one point there's a ship going underneath them. They're on this like little bridge, and she ties her lightsaber up to a rope and then drops it down and cuts up their ship in half. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's badass right there. And they capture one of the Nagri. The Wookiees have captured them. I
like this, where he's like, "You're the daughter of Vader." And
all he does
kind
is
of find out.
All he does is like sniff her hand, and he Nagri knows.
Okay, I didn't catch that, but I see. And this is where they kind of learned that the Nagri were like a race that worship Palpatine and Vader because he saved them or something. And they're going to show her, because she's Lady Vader, I forget what it is. They're going to take her somewhere to show her something.
Yeah, they don't really say.
Not in this book.
No.
I think this is the end of her story in this because she ends up, maybe she's in the next issue, but I know she's leaving to go to where the Nagri want to take her.
Yeah.
And this is then where you have Luke and Mara Jade are still in the woods, and there's a part where she gets attacked by one of the Dragon Hounds, we're going to call them now, and Luke ends up getting his lightsaber back and ends up cutting the thing up.
Yeah.
And I don't get this. Like she points the gun, the blaster at him. He just gives her back the lightsaber. He could deflect it at that point, unless he's too close.
Yeah. Maybe he senses that. She's not an entirely evil person. I don't know.
And then
they don't have the relationship right now that shows that they're mortal enemies. Maybe they think they are mortal enemies, but they're.
Well, she blames him for things that she kind of mentioned, like I have to kill you. I don't think she doesn't. I don't think she says why yet. Yeah, no, she tells him why.
Well, you destroyed the Emperor. She was the Emperor's hand. You know, the kind of the doer, the person that when he tells you to go somewhere, you do it. Like your hitman, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I don't remember her in the movies. Do you?
She's not from the movies.
I don't. She's also not canon yet either. Again.
Yeah, that's true.
They haven't brought her back yet.
I wonder if that will change.
I hope so. I'd like to see her back in the actual canon. I'm hoping that she'll be in one of the shows that are coming out, like Ahsoka or one of those shows. I'm hoping.
Well, if they brought Thrawn back, they might as well bring her back too.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see what happens in the coming.
We'll
years.
see.
And then it cuts back to Admiral Thrawn talking about how because I think throughout this entire miniseries or this first, these 6 issues, he's talking about how you have to go to a certain planet or the certain area, this sluice van or something like that.
Yeah, sluice van. I don't quite know why, but he needs to get there because he's going to mount an attack on the shipyards, something like that.
Yeah, they don't really talk about it a whole lot yet.
No.
And then the way the 6th issue starts is it kind of shows you where Luke and Mara Jade know they have to kind of work together because they were told by Talon Creed that the city they're heading to, Admiral Thrawn already has stormtroopers waiting for them. So they they want to change up. He's like, okay, we should change their dynamic. They're looking for a, male prisoner. So it's like, okay, and I like how he takes the lightsaber and puts it back in R2-D2. And she's like, oh, so that's how you got it into Jabba's palace.
Yeah, that's nice.
Because she was there.
It's very nice.
It did amuse me how she takes this like random weed she finds, or weed that she knew about, and rubs it on his arm so he looks all infected.
Yeah,
so they won't recognize him.
It's funny because I just watched I was watching a TV show called Future Man, and they do something very similar to fool people. Is that they kind of disfigure someone's face to fool like facial recognition scanners. I mean, and it works here.
Yeah, it does, because when the Imperials show up, even you have someone who's like an officer, he's like, oh, okay, you're a bounty hunter? All right, sounds good. Like, they don't even question, like, you look really familiar. Half your face looks like the guy that threw Vader and killed Vader and Palpatine. Maybe. They don't even catch that, but...
There's no wanted poster hung up of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, but you think the entire government of the Empire would know this guy is number one. He killed everybody.
Yeah, he basically killed the president and the president's, number one, the president and the vice president. I figured they know about that.
Not to mention he blew up our star base twice.
So he killed the president, the vice president, blew up the White House. And he was also the son of Hitler or whatever. So, but we don't know what he looks like.
We've never seen him before.
It's weird how Star Wars works sometimes. You never know quite how the mass media works,
Yeah.
But, it's a fantasy, I guess.
Well, also the whole idea that, if people aren't expecting something to be there, it won't be there for them.
Right, that's true.
And that is a true thing. I mean, I've seen that in real life where people don't realize, won't realize somebody's somebody unless they're expecting it.
Right, I guess that's true.
So that's how I take this part.
Yeah.
And then then it shows Han Solo is brought into, as a prisoner in quotations, into this town, when it's really just Talon Creed, setting up the Imperials, because they know they need to work together to get rid of these Imperials so then he can leave.
Yeah.
And this is a cool scene where he sees a whole trap where the, Talon Creed, Lando, and all his men are kind of waiting to ambush the Imperials, and Luke tells them to wait until they're in the bridge, and they get all mad at him thinking he's an idiot. And apparently there's no Yasamari in town because he uses his force powers. Or no, does he use force? No, he uses the lightsaber. Never mind.
Well, he does kind of like throw it about like a boomerang.
Yeah, that is a force throw then. Has to be.
They must not have any of the creatures.
Which makes sense. You wouldn't have them in town.
Yeah, they're all on the outskirts.
And this is when they end up, Talon. They kind of team up with. Well, Talon Creed has to leave the planet. They get in the Millennium Falcon to head towards. Are they heading towards I think they find out about the space yard, right, or about the attack that's coming.
Yeah. So they're going to the Sluice Van shipyards. Yeah. So they're towing his X-wing, and they're like, let's get it fixed up. We got to go there.
I think this was a big scene in the book. I'm assuming it's like a couple chapters.
This is like the climax.
Okay, because they go to the shipyard, and Admiral Thrawn shows up, and there's all a bunch of X-Wings there, and fighters, and everyone's attacking each other. And this is where you find out that the mole miners he stole earlier, he's using the mole miners to attack the carriers that the rebels have, and board them, and take the ships over.
Yeah, they need the ships, and that's what the point was.
Which I vaguely remember this from the audiobook all those years ago. Vaguely remember this part. Like it was when I got it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a little familiar. And you get to see space troopers.
Space troopers. They never go back to them. I think this is their one and only appearance.
They're just stormtroopers in zero gravity armor that come out of like little things and get blown up.
Every Star Wars has like a new brand of stormtrooper, and they're continually operating or continually improving and updating those. And these are the ones from this book. But they kind of just blow them up with lasers. They're not very efficient.
No, they're kind of useless. And this is also when they realize that Lando still has remote control access to the mole miners, and they just make them just burn through all the ships so that the Imperials can't take the ships that they took over. And I think he even says we haven't been defeated, we just been slowed down. I think they did seal some ships, I think, still, just not as many as they were trying to.
Yeah, it was they lost the battle, but it wasn't, Thrawn has them withdraw. We haven't been defeated, he says, merely slowed down. As long as we have Mount Tantus, our ultimate victory is assured.
Yeah, and they don't mention what Mount Tantus is in this miniseries or this book.
Yeah, but I think it comes into play later.
Yeah,
I'm not quite certain.
And they also find out that Admiral Akbar was arrested.
Yes, and that they're setting that up a little bit, I guess, because the political stuff going on in Coruscant, but we don't quite know why, and that'll have to be continued in the next book,
which I have never read or listened to the audio, so I'm actually very excited to see the second. When I had gotten these, I got all three, put them on my phone, but I never got around to finishing them.
Oh, really?
I listened to the first one, I listened to part of the second one, then I just stopped. I don't know why.
Very nice. Well, then we'll have, it's all going to be new to you then.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm very excited.
It's going to be mostly new to me. It's been 21 years, 22 years,
And then at the very last line is how they talk about this could lead to a civil war.
Yeah.
And then that ends the first miniseries in the first book.
Yeah. I mean, something's coming. It's like it ends on a cliffhanger. So,
I also like that even on like the book, it even says volume 1 of a 3-book cycle. I wonder if it was like, it's volume 1 unless you don't buy our book, then there is no volume 2.
Right. Yeah. Well, this book was unexpectedly a bestseller. Like when it came out, because no one's expecting a Star Wars book would be up there with great literature on the New York Times list, but it was, and that kind of spawned the rest of the book series, which lasted up until kind of the new canon came out. So it lasted about
Disney bought it
20 years. Yeah,
cut everything out.
Yeah. Have you seen these covers? In my book I have a cover gallery of the 6 issues, but I don't know if you see those.
I see them on the what I'm looking at. I can see the covers. I do like the covers. I think they have very good drawings of the characters.
Yeah. I don't know how they compare to the Dark Empire. Dark Empire maybe had a little bit more sophisticated covers, but
yeah,
I think these are evocative too. These are nice covers.
Dark Horse had good Star Wars comics.
That's true.
At least what I'm reading so far. Like, this was enjoyable.
Yeah.
I mean, the covers didn't do anything to really stand out to me, but they're still cool. I still wouldn't mind owning them.
Yeah, if you saw it, I mean, you would be like, that's Star Wars. I better check it out.
I want these books, no question. I don't really buy comics anymore or look for comics, but yeah, I do want these.
Yeah. I picked up the trade, the collection of all of them, and it's very expensive nowadays, even the collection. So I was lucky to get a hold of it for just a couple $dollars back in the day.
Well, that's because they probably weren't reprinted ever again.
I don't think so. There may be like a collection somewhere with them, but I'm sure they weren't Sure they weren't.
Okay, for the comic, Star Wars Heir to the Empire, number 1 and number 2 on eBay as of November 2021, sorry, $150.
Jesus.
Another guy selling just the first book, first appearance of Thrawn and Mara Jade, $150. So, yeah, they're not cheap.
No.
Even the trade, someone's selling the trade paperback for $35 with bids. No bids yet, but these are not cheap books anymore.
Yeah, a lot of Star Wars books, I work at a used bookstore and I see them come in, they're not expensive at all. So these ones are kind of rare ones that there's a demand for them, probably because of the legacy of Grand Admiral Thrawn. So,
well, I doubt these were ever re-released.
Right, that too.
Because Dark Horse doesn't have the license anymore, and Disney's not going to want to release something that, they're not going to, these aren't canon anymore. They're not going to want these out there, even though they should be. But yeah, that is expensive.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I had these books now. So yeah, I think we should go to Shelf Stacker Box.
Sure.
And I'll go first. So when I came into this, I had high expectations because I was excited to finally, absorb this information again, maybe in a better format because I don't read. I should, but I don't. And I was like, okay, I got so excited when I first heard that was a miniseries, and I remember telling people, they're like, no, it's a book. I'm like, but there's a comic miniseries. And I read it. I enjoyed it. I read it pretty quickly. The art was nice enough to get into. The story was interesting, even though it's the first part of a trilogy, but it was still very, it's very good, even though it doesn't fill out. You don't get answers to anything, because I'm assuming I won't get my answers I want until The Last Command, the final book of this.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoyed it. I'm going to put it on the shelf. I'm very glad I finally got to read it in a shape or form, and I got to record about it. So I'm very happy. What about you?
Keep it on your shelf, I think. This is one of the premier Star Wars comics, or the Star Wars stories, I would say. Heir to the Empire is widely regarded as, if not the best, and one of the best Star Wars novels. And for any Star Wars casual fan, you need to read it just to understand what all the fuss is about. So if you like Star Wars, you get to see what's going on here. It's not a complete story, like Mike said, but it's the beginning, and you should at least see if you want to continue reading the other issues from then on out.
And if you want to read this comic, don't eBay it unless you want to own it, because it's not. Just Google's your friend. That's all I'm going to say. Google. You'll find.
No one needs the money anymore. I'll say that.
Well, I mean, if Disney cared, it would be in digital. I don't know. Maybe it's in digital form, but no, there's no chance. Because the right issues. But when it comes to stuff that can no longer be obtained except by dropping hundreds of dollars on eBay, I always tell people, get it any way you can at that point, because you're not benefiting anybody. You're not benefiting the company because you gave some guy on eBay $200. It doesn't matter. I mean, hell, the trade it's more than a trade should be.
But if you really want to,
$95 is the only one on eBay that I found.
There is, there is a Thrawn trilogy hardcover that I just went to Amazon, and they had an Amazon starting at $500. Don't pay that.
Unless you want to own it just to own it for own its sake. There's nothing wrong with that. I have freaking comic book all around me on the wall and stuff of first appearances. So I get it if you want to spend that kind of money. If I saw that book now, first appearance of Thrawn, buy it in a heartbeat, not for the price that people want for it. If I'm going to spend $150 on a book, it's going to be the first appearance of a Marvel character, not a.
Not to disparage Grand Admiral Thrawn, but
I paid less for my first appearance of Hawkeye and Vision. Those are my more expensive books that are on my wall above me right now.
Right.
So yeah,
I'm looking at eBay. A sold copy of Thrawn trilogy, $130. That's what you're looking at, people.
Yeah, just Google. Read it any way you can, because it's definitely worth reading this comic. Especially if you're like me and don't really want to read a book, and comics easier,
Very true.
And we will be covering Dark Force Rising at some point, probably sooner than later, because I want to. So
sounds good to me.
it might be a lot sooner than later. We'll see. And if you want to hear more Star Wars, we have covered a lot of Star Wars on the show. We did Star Wars Dark Empire 2 / Empire's End, which is not very good, but the Dark Empire 2 is okay. Comic 30, also with Peter. We did Star Wars Dark Empire, Comic 27, also with Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars Force Unleashed, episode 115. Star Wars The Mandalorian, season 2, TV 1. That's up there. Also, at the time that you're hearing this, Mandalorian 1 should be out also. So if you want to get all caught up with Star Wars, there's that. Star Wars Bounty Hunter, the game, episode 87. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, episode 69. Star Wars Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, comic 6. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire, episode 48. Star Wars Holiday Special, film 6. That's a fun one.
I was in very many of these episodes.
Most of them, yeah. Star Wars Republic Commando, episode 21. And Star Wars Dark Forces, the PC PS1 game, episode 13. Our first Star Wars thing on the show. So damn long ago.
That was, yeah. It was.
Almost 3 years ago at this point.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of Star Wars content for you to go listen to if you want to hear more. And Peter, where can people find you at again?
For me, I have a website called peterbp.com, but also if you Google The Fifth Civilization, I'll pop up, and I would say give it a read if you like Star Wars or if you like any sort of sci-fi adventure.
Okay. And there will be a link in the show notes, as always, to check that out. So definitely look in the show notes. And as I didn't say at the top of the show, but I will say now, we have a Patreon. For as little as $1, you can go vote in our Patreon poll. Every month we have a different one. What it is at the time you're hearing this, I don't know, because I don't know when you're going to hear this exactly. And I haven't thought of any of the polls for the future. So go check that out. And I want to give a shout out to our awesome intro and outro, courtesy of Helena at Hell Has Fury at TikTok. She made us a new intro and outro in the last few months that now we have in the show. So definitely want to give a shout out to her. Also want to give a shout out to my buddy who did the MCU with me, Bill Tucker, who's also on a lot of the film episodes of the show. He started his own podcast, A Gamer Looks at 40. We'll see a link in the show notes. Definitely go check him out. He does some quality work. And I think the last thing I need to say is please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and on YouTube. We're only audio, but we're on YouTube. So go check us out there if you like your podcast that way. Otherwise, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're there somewhere. I'm everywhere. If you Google us, you will find us. We're there. Games My Mom Found. It's everywhere. Go find all your shows. And Podbean has everything if you're missing old episodes and can't find them on other parts. So that's all that I got for you guys. And I want to thank Peter for joining me again for more Star Wars. And look forward to Dark Force Rising is coming. At some point, we will be reviewing that probably in the next couple months of time you hear this. So check that out. Probably within a month you hear this. And we will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.